today's focus is on tanks. We are having our tier list for the tanks power level at the beginning of the next season, which, never mind the fact that it's more than a month away and probably 4 to 5 balance tuning passes away, this is what we have for now. Based on what we have seen in terms of performance of these tanks in the beta, it is now time, we are quite close now to the release of the expansion, so it's now time to decide which tanks to pick, and this is what we can see based on how they have been doing in the competitive content in the beta. So we're starting with the first one. I'm quite happy to announce this. We are putting Brewmaster Monk in the S tier for both the Raid and Mythic Plus. Now, we have, to be fair, an entire video dedicated to what makes Brewmaster Monk good. So we will try to condense that video. The absolute biggest point was reducing their deathly weakness of lack of self-healing and requiring a pocket healer even to ask to go to the bathroom. You still needed to be guarded because you were so just weak by yourself. This has been fixed greatly thanks to Vital Flame, your new 50% life steal talent from fire and nature damage. Your Master of Harmony talent has been updated also to be doing nature damage to match Shadowpan, which already does nature damage. You are going back, you have skipped it for a few seasons, you're going back to playing Breath of Fire, obviously, because you want the fire damage. And this is just great help for your self-healing. Both Vital Flame in your healing done and Refreshing Drink, which is your new Apex talent, even though it doesn't look nearly as good as this graph, simply because half of this healing from Refreshing Drink goes on your allies, not on you. But what actually is even better than this graph is the fact that Celestial Fortune is just extra healing from your other healing sources, which means also Vital Flame and also Refreshing Drink, because Celestial Fortune makes you heal yourself more from your other healing abilities. It's a very good way to give more tankiness to Brewmaster, giving them more healing done instead of giving them dodge or more parry or more block or more absorb shields. It's very good to give them healing because they already have a passive which makes them heal more, so it synergizes very well. Brewmaster as a whole has gotten a lot of higher casts per minute of the actually good spells you want to cast, like your Brews, Keg Smash and Breath of Fire, and less casts per minute of the fodder, Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick and the removed Rising Sun Kick. You have increased by over 50% your casts per minute of Keg Smash and Breath of Fire, and by over 30% of your casts of Purifying Brew. These are very good, because Keg Smash by itself reduces the cooldown of Purifying Brew, of your brews. The more you get to cooldown reduction, the more you get to cast your brews. The more you cast your brews, the more you proc other tools in your kit. For example, drinking brews has a chance to give you an empty barrel. When you get the empty barrel from your Apex talent, you reset the cooldown of Keg Smash. So the more brews you drink, the more resets of Keg Smash you get. You cast more Keg Smash, you reset the cooldown of more brews. Casting more brews also gives you special delivery as a talent proc. Casting more brews gives you more empty barrel damage, which is your Apex talent. And of course we kind of skipped this, but casting more brews gives you more tankiness, because that's how you stay alive, by drinking and reducing your stagger. So all of this is synergizing very well for Brewmaster. You are much tankier in Mythic Plus now compared to before. You have received a stream of different QOLs. We haven't even mentioned the added part to your already existing high tolerance talent. Now if you chug a brew during high stagger, you get a free 6-second CDR. If you play with high tolerance, for even more Purifying Brew casts. So it's been all very good. We haven't even mentioned the fact that their damage is also super high right now. So on top of the defensiveness, you do very good damage. We have put them obviously in the S tier for the raid because they have already been a staple normally, even when they weren't that strong overall. Plus now with Mistweaver being kinda weak and Windwalker being okay, the chances of you being brought, even just for the raid buff, if you weren't strong, were very high. But on top of that, you're also strong as a tank, so even more chances of you being brought in the raid. So very well deserved S tier spot for Brewmaster right now, both in the raid and in Mythic Plus. The next in line we are referring in our tier list is going to be Guardian Druid. Now the power level of Guardian Druid is quite increased when it comes to Mythic Plus. In the raid, it's still towards the bottom end. We will see later on what we mean by that, but in Mythic Plus you have received significant improvements. The key of these improvements was a couple of weeks ago with these buffs right here. You got tons of self-healing, but also tankiness improvements with this set of buffs. 10% more Iron Fur armor, plus Frenzied Regen. Yes, it heals for less, but it got a whooping 10-second cooldown reduction. On top of that, much more damage. Mangle buffed by 30%, Moonfire buffed by 30%, and Moonless Night buffed by an extra 20%, was over 10% of your damage done, just from these. Not mentioning Lunar Beam, which is less damage, as well as Killing Blow for even more damage. So now you do tons of damage. Even in single target, the asterisk when it comes to the raid value of Guardian is that you are the tank for doing single target damage right now, which can get a lot of value in Mythic Plus. However, the benefits in here for Guardian in Mythic Plus are within the fact that now you are even more self-sufficient. You weren't as weak as Brewmaster in the self-healing you didn't have, but now it's much better. Giving you lower healing on Frenzied Regen when it already had tons of overhealing in order to be able to cast it more often is just flat out better than before. Another, under the radar but very crucial QOL in this expansion was how they changed Dream of Scenarios. This previously either used to be limited to only one proc at a time, or limited in how often it could proc, like on a 20-second internal cooldown. This has been removed now in this expansion. Now, Dream of Scenarios can stack up to 4 times. And it's not that this means that you can use 4 different regrowths, one after the other. It means the healing increase of 130% stacks on top of itself. This means that if you keep stacking this up, and as you can see here, all of the stacks get consumed at once, but if you consume them when it gets to high stacks, basically you have a lay on hands on a 45-ish to 1 minute cooldown. You can see here the healing done of regrowths are more than your entire HP. As a tank, they are about 4 times stronger than a single Frenzied Regen. That's how powerful that regrowth can grow. So that is also very strong. Your damage was buffed significantly, your self-healing was improved quite a lot thanks to the better Frenzied Regen, but also now this much stronger regrowth for you. What could be perhaps the only asterisk to the entire spec is that at the moment your Apex talent is garbage. You even saw, perhaps you missed it when we showed the default Mythic Plus talent build for Guardians, there is no Apex talent in here. And there isn't because Druids are just ignoring it. They have decided other talent points in their tree are just more value than your Apex talent. At most, what tanks are doing is putting 1 point in your first talent, which is like 90% of the power of the already weak Apex talent. So getting 2 empowered casts of Iron Fur, Maul and Frenzied Regen every time you use Incarnation. That's the thing. The rest of the talents are terrible. They don't really do nearly as much in terms of value, so that you just spend them in the rest of your tree. That's why it's kind of awkward, because Blizzard is making these Apex talents for this expansion, so are they really going to let a spec basically play without them? It's unlikely. Probably they will have to, give another pass to Guardian Druid because of this, so we will see later on how it shapes up, but for now, it's looking very good in Mythic Plus, and it's still looking decent in the raid. The next one is a Fallen Noble. It's Vengeance Demon Hunter. We followed Vengeance Demon Hunter for a while in the beta, even documented it as being the strongest tank for quite a few weeks early on in the beta. And the thing is that they haven't even been significantly cripplingly nerfed over time. It's just that other tanks received multiple positive changes one after the other, which have made them pass Vengeance. Now, one of the the more annoying things we pointed out about Vengeance was how simplified it was, how streamlined it was, how many of the cool skill expression tools you lost going from the War Within to Midnight. Things like, for example, losing Frailty, so losing the skill expression of knowing when to time these buttons to stack them on top of each other to gain more and more multiple stacks of healing increase and damage taken reduction. It's gone. Now it's a straightforward passive. Demonic, your on-demand meta after I-Beam, after Fell Devastation proc is gone. Now this has been shifted onto your Apex talent, which is not nearly as much as on demand. It's more on an RNG element of Metamorphosis. The fact that with the talent changes you have received, plus your tier set and your Apex talents, and even your hero talents, there is now zero synergy around some of your other buttons that have now been left behind. Things like Fell Devastation, things like Sigil of Flame, depending on your hero talent, even Fellblade, are like ignored now as a spec. They don't really have nearly as much value, and they don't really interact with much of the rest of your kit. But up to the point when we were talking about Vengeance, this still wasn't an issue for them being S tier, because the performance was still very good and they were the most played tank, even in high keys. Now, however, it's not really like this anymore. Vengeance is not played nearly as much. You still have the same problems you had before, like for example, two of your biggest defensives, Firebrand and Frailty, are target required, which means you skip environmental damage. So if something comes from the environment, like stuff on the floor, for example, you're not able to reduce its damage from these abilities. But over the course of the beta and all of the changes to the other tanks, you just haven't gotten nearly anything really exciting or even just calling it a buff for the spec. We have put them much lower in the raid for the simple fact that Vengeance is never really quite a traditional raid tank. They don't really bring anything special, any cheese possibility, any kind of niche element they might have, like super tanky on physical damage or super great on magical damage. They don't really have anything like that. And on top of that, the other thing that could bail you out, which is the other specs in your class being terrible, so you just get a free spot in the raid to bring the Demon Hunter debuff, doesn't happen here, because both Havoc and Devourer are doing fine, especially Devourer is doing more than fine in the raid, so the chances of you being brought as a tank in the raid just because you need a Demon Hunter are very low. After Vengeance, we have another one of the Fallen Nobles, which is Prot Paladin. Prot Paladin goes into the B tier, middle-ish of the pack when it comes to Mythic Plus, right next to Vengeance and far above Vengeance, actually, in the raid. So for the raid, it's just a very quick reverse of Vengeance. Prot has been traditionally quite often used in the raid. They have multiple niches and cheeses they can have between their own bubble, between mechanic breaking features like Blessing of Freedom having to be used, Blessing of Protection also can be used for that effect. They have their own bubble and their own cheat that can also be used, as well as being a Paladin that can bring Devotion Aura, and even back in the days when you wanted two raid buffs, Devotion and Retribution Aura. It has been good because that oftentimes, very often in fact, the Red Paladin has never really been a meta raid spec, and Holy Paladin, more recently than in the past, they haven't been brought nearly as much, which brings out more chances for Prot Paladin to be played, compared to something like Vengeance Demon Hunter, where they have gotten higher value thanks to the set of buffs they have received towards the end of last year, where these things right here, they gotten much more streamlined, higher base tankiness. Their base armor, the extra armor from Shield of the Righteous, more self-healing from Consecration, they were all buffed. That's when the play rate of Prot spiked up. They were doing very well in the beta in Mythic Plus compared to other tanks right after these, but over time things sort of fell off compared to the couple of other tanks we have here, Guardian and Brewmaster. Now, Prot still is a tank that can be quite solid in Mythic Plus. They do play on, in 1 minute windows, because with the talent setups you have now as a Prot Paladin, your Holy Bulwarks from Lightsmith on a 1 minute, since you don't play with a CDR, on a 1 minute cooldown, Divine Toll on a 1 minute cooldown, Sentinel on a 1 minute cooldown, and Ardent Defender on almost a 1 minute cooldown. That's your cycle in Mythic Plus. You have these 1 minute CDs to play each big pool. Once you're starting to run dry, you can supply these with one of your longer CDs, Guardian of Ancient Kings and Bubble. That's your sort of your flow when you go into Mythic Plus packs, but you are very squishy outside of these. You have the second lowest health pool of all tanks. You're also quite punishing if you make mistakes, because, with all of these buttons, to tankify yourself, you need to know how to push them. Unlike other tanks that have much fewer of these buttons, they are much more straightforward. With Prot Paladin, you have to manage more of these buttons. Whether it is Ardent Defender, Bubble, Guardian, or if it's Divine Toll, if it's your Holy Bulwark procs, if it's Divine Shield, Spell Warding, you have to press them. And you have to know when to press them. It's way more punishing compared to most other tanks. And this has been made better. As we mentioned, the set of buffs have helped out of this to make you tankier in general, but the thing is, at the same time you were made tankier, other tanks like Guardian and Brewmaster were also made tankier, so you haven't really gotten at the very least past them when it comes to Mythic Plus. But overall you're still a more than decent Mythic Plus tank, while still having a pretty high chance of being a useful, possibly even straight up meta tank when it comes to the raid. After the Paladin prot, we move to the Warrior prot. So protection joins Paladin in A tier when it comes to the raid, but falls all the way to the bottom when it comes to Mythic Plus. Let's skip quickly past the raid point. It's quite obvious. You are a tank, you are one of the goats at taking physical damage and being resilient against heavy hits from bosses, which is very important in the raid very often, so you still have a lot of value there. What gives you even more value in the raid, way more than in Mythic Plus, is what we mentioned already for a few other specs, which is other specs in your class and their possible meta level. Who easily across all of these tanks has the best chance of getting a free spot because of this is Prot Warrior. All of the other classes in here have one meta spec bound to be good, possibly. Like you have Windwalker being quite good in the raid, you have Holy Paladin being quite good, Restoration Druid is likely gonna be meta, Devourer is gonna be possibly meta, and Unholy is also gonna be meta. But for Warrior, the 2 DPS are shit. So for you, not only were you already decent in general and being a raid tank, but now with the state of your DPS brothers, it's even more likely for you to get a spot in the raid. You don't get any of this bailout in Mythic Plus though. In Mythic Plus you're on your own and you're screwed as a protection warrior. So we often play this mini game when you talk about prot, spot the differences. Is this image an image from the last expansion, or is this image an image from the beta of Midnight? The answer is you don't know, because the spells are the exact same you press in both expansions, because you haven't changed as a prot warrior. Now, this is where someone could ask, hold on a second, but in this season that just ended, Prot Warrior was meta. So why is it bad if you're playing the exact same as the expansion where you were meta? Well, first, same thing we mentioned about another couple of tanks that fell down a bit, like Prot Paladin and Vengeance, because other tanks have improved in the meantime, like Guardian and Brewmaster, but even Paladin itself has improved as well. So staying the same as the last expansion while being pruned of a few tools and passives while other tanks improve is quite bad. So Prot Warrior hasn't really gained anything new, anything extra, and they lost a few things. In particular, they lost a lot, a key point around their own self-healing, like Indomitable, and the self-healing from spending Rage, the cooldown reduction from spending Rage, and the self-healing from Deep Wounds and your bleeds. These are gone, and you haven't gotten too much out of it. Another one of the niche positive things Prot Warrior have, especially since Montantane, was their DPS, their Thunderclap DPS, reminiscent of their BFA Azerite trait days of Thunderclap damage. This has been nerfed. Montantane, even though warriors are still playing it, it has been nerfed quite a bit in terms of your damage, so you don't even have now great damage either. So you stayed the same from the last expansion. Other tanks have been improved way more than you have been improved. Your Apex talent is okay, it's nothing special, it doesn't carry you like it carries a few other specs in terms of, in this case, either tankiness or damage, and it hasn't really been helped in a few of the weaknesses it already had, even if you have been pruned, etc. Maybe with the new tier set, maybe with the new Apex talent, maybe with the new addition to the hero talents, you're still quite weak against unblockable and unreflectable damage, so basically dots. You're still essentially requiring your own cooldowns to even survive because you're much weaker against those mechanics, and your self-healing is still quite weak. It doesn't really scale very well, Ignore Pain, in terms of as an absorb compared to other specs. We don't even have to mention, Blood Decay directly. Even Vengeance and now even Guardian Druid are comfortably in a better position than you. So that's what puts you, much lower down compared to before. You have been, slightly weakened compared to your current meta state in Season 3 of The War Within, plus the improvements of the other tanks. Now, the last of the list is Blood. So, Blood Decay stays at the bottom in Mythic Plus and stays just above Vengeance in the raid. Now, when it comes to the raid, they have the same asterisk we mentioned for Prot Warrior and for Prot Paladin around the possible niches you might have in the raid as a Blood Decay. You are, of course, very self-sufficient. You can survive very many things in the raid. You're much better at magical damage than a few of these other tanks, and you have grip, right? The asterisk raid buff asterisk that you are being given by Blizzard can you know, usually we can guess Blizzard will come up with at least 1 or 2 fights in the entire raid that will require grips to be used. So just that by default makes you more useful than a Vengeance Demon Hunter. But besides that feature, you don't have much else going in the raid. Definitely not when it comes to possibly being brought because you are the only good one in your class. Unholy is more than good enough to take a spot in the raid this season, so that's not gonna happen for Blood. And for Mythic Plus, there isn't really anything really to be excited about when it comes to Blood DK. We mentioned that for Prot Warrior you were meta in Season 3, and then you lost just barely a few things, but the other tanks were improved enough that they passed you. We can't even say that for Blood, because Blood wasn't meta in Season 3. There was nothing really there was nothing really to be too excited about Blood in Season 3, and then you haven't been improved by that much in this expansion. In fact, overall, in terms of sort of flow of the spec in general, was losing quite a few important tools that you could have used, especially increasing your, basically, your skill expression as a tank, like losing things like Rune Tap, losing an extra defensive in Lichborn. You still have the same issues you had before as a Blood DK, the fact that you essentially are tuned around being slapped in the face whenever you have Mythic Plus pools, for example, where there are too many casters. A lot of the damage comes from slow, long hits, casts, etc. are very poor for you. You just want to be slapped at all times, as well as wanting to stay very close to your enemies, not really wanting any kind of downtime because of your own self-healing coming from being hit and healing yourself back. None of this is being, you know, addressed in Midnight, even with the pruning and the things you lost. Again, hoping you could get something back in terms of Apex talents, in terms of hero talents, in terms of tier set bonuses. That's not really happening. Your Apex talent was nerfed significantly back when you were meta, the first like 2 weeks of the beta, and then it was nerfed, and since then you haven't really recovered as a Blood DK. And that's the thing, since then it's been 2 months. It's been 2 months and you haven't really been given any particular attention by Blizzard. You have been buffed, sure, recently. That was good, sure, that was fine. Damage increase all across the board, plus base tankiness increase, that was fine, but not enough to fix the problems of Blood DK, or more than even just your problems, the better tools the other tanks have right now. This leaves you towards the bottom in Mythic Plus. That is what we can see right now in terms of the state of the power level for tanks, both in Mythic Plus and in the raid. Taking into account, of course, that the raid is much less tuned around who is the more powerful and more tuned around how do we fit the rest of our comp and our required buffs and whatnot, and then the tank spots. So that can fluctuate way more. It can't fluctuate like that in Mythic Plus. In Mythic Plus, if there is the strongest tank, that's what players will go for, compared to the flexibility of the picks in the raid. So we will see, of course, following this, with the next, my guess is 5 at least rounds of balance tuning that will happen, if any of this will be shaken up by the balance tuning of Blizzard. But for now, this is what we can expect towards the expected power level of the tanks at the beginning of the next season. So, with this out of the way, we can now leave each other on this Friday, I believe. We can start our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting Competitive for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, well, you know, this winter is going by. We have yet to have a single snow day. We are on like a 4 out of 10 for now for this winter. It's not looking good.